Okay, so welcome, Laura.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me.
It's really a pleasure to have you. I am very excited about our conversation and just sort of exploring the legal issues that families who take care of an aging parent or loved one and elders what they face. So please, can you just share with us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, my name is Laura Axon Ford. I have an office, a sole practice. Right now, I'm located in Jersey City, New Jersey. I'm licensed in New York and in New Jersey, and I started out in New York. I went to law school at St. John's University Law School in Jamaica, Queens, and I worked in New York for several years. Started out with landlord-tenant law, believe it or not. Then I moved to New Jersey when I got married, got licensed in New Jersey, and I worked with an elder law attorney uh, from Hoboken who taught me a lot about this area of practice. And I'm on my own since that time. So I'm a sole practitioner. It's a different kind of it's a very personal kind of area of law, and I find it very rewarding. So that's what I do. And in my practice, I do estate planning documents such as wills, powers of attorney. I work with guardianships, including I've been appointed by our superior court judges to be a temporary guardian in cases where people don't have guardians and there are legal proceedings involving them. Um, and Medicaid applications. Elder law is so expansive at this time, and I was thinking about when I first, when I was very, very young,
Uh-huh.
my grandma lived with us. She was
Oh,
my dad's mom, and she had 12 children.
wow.
And
Okay.
so when she was older, she
Mm-hmm.
just went from house to house and stayed with one of her children's families for a month or so, and then was rotated to the other homes. And she passed away in the rocking chair in our sunroom in our house when I was 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
And later on, my own mom passed away peacefully in her bed in that same house.
Wow.
And 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 back then, elder care was just something when your parents got old, you just took care of them in your
Uh-huh.
home. They didn't have many assets or anything to worry about at that point in time, and everybody contributed. My job at age 9 was to help my grandma get out of bed and help her get dressed and come downstairs and have her breakfast of raisin bran every morning,
Uh-huh.
and we all looked after her.
Yes.
And it was not anywhere near as complex as things have become now. Now we have so much by way of documentation and institutions and protocols, and it's a very confusing uh, place for people to navigate, and for not just the elderly, but for their families, just to understand what it is they can do, how to recognize even what the issues are that need to be taken care of, and then, of course, we're assuming that there are intact families uh, that are willing and able to be part of the process to take care of their loved ones as they age.
Thank you for sharing that. As I'm listening to you, I can sort of, and my other conversations that I've had in interviews, I just think about sort of how overwhelming it is for families. And one of the things that come to mind is when you and I had a preliminary discussion, you referred to the experience as tender. And can you talk about that and share, to us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Very often, the way that I become involved uh, with an elderly client is someone from the person's family will call me up, usually one of their children, and say, "We need to do X and such for our mother or our father, or we need to have a will drawn, or we need to have a power of attorney, or we would like you to come and see her and see what what needs to be done. Sometimes it's in their home. Sometimes they bring the individual to my office. Sometimes it's even a nursing home or a rehab facility. And so when I first meet this family, I'm meeting them in at a very tender moment. There's a lot
Mm.
of emotion. There's pain. There's physical pain of the person who is, who is suffering through various issues associated with being older.
Uh-huh.
There's confusion among family members. And there are unresolved emotional issues that family members have with respect to each other. And so I refer to it as a tender time. I walk into this and I try to assess and evaluate where all of the energies are, and what is the best approach to take to assist the family in what they need. And sometimes, very often, they're not really sure what it is that they need either. So
Mm-hmm.
we need to start out by just kind of getting some information and finding out what the status is at that point and where we go from that point.
Yeah. So I'm hearing this as a sort of a reoccurring situation, event, incident, where it's usually after the fact. I spoke to someone as well last week who heads up a home health care agency, and he also talked about after the fact. So, like, we wait until we find our parents in who have already fallen, or in the basement, or whatever the circumstances are. And can you speak to more about that, and what can we do as caregivers or families to avoid that? Like, why is it that it they come to you, or we try to seek help after?
Oh
I'm
boy,
trying to sort of
yeah.
understand. I'm trying to sort of understand that, you know?
Yeah, it's a number of things. First of all, that children may not be living with the parent or living near the parent. They may not have the time to see the parent from a day to day basis. Um, Older people have a fair amount of pride too, and they often will hide the seriousness of their situation from their children. The children may not know even about their finances. Because
Okay.
they've been independent for so long. And the child may live in another state, somewhere far away, and be very involved in bringing up their own family, and not not see the parent often enough to actually realize what's taking place.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
I would say that that's probably the case. More often than not, nobody wants to acknowledge their weaknesses. And the other thing is, I think that there are misconceptions when it comes to the legal part of it. I think there's misconceptions about that. One of the misconceptions is regarding, for example, a power of attorney, which is a
Uh-huh.
very important document. In some cases, it may be more important than a will. A power of attorney is a document in which an individual gives someone else the authority to handle all of their business, anything that they could conduct for themselves,
Okay.
whether it's related to insurance or taxes or their real estate or their bank accounts or brokerage accounts or home paying for employees in home care, any of those things that a person could normally do, and they give that authority to someone else.
Uh-huh.
Well, many people feel that if they give a power of attorney to somebody else, they've lost control over their life. They feel as though, well, if I give power of attorney to my son, that means that I can no longer do things for myself, and that's not correct. It's a
Okay.
misconception that people have. They can still, to the extent that they're able, they can
Uh-huh.
still make their own decisions. It's just that they're also allowing somebody else to act as their agent. And so, explaining that to people, sometimes um, I, in the past, there have been times when I didn't realize that that was the thing that was causing someone to be very hesitant about executing this document. And now I put more time and effort into reassuring them as to what it means and what they can do, and that their agent has to act on their behalf. And I also advise the agent which is usually a child or a close relative or even a spouse, that they're only to act on behalf of the principal who's given them that authority, and that they should include the principal in the decision making as much as possible, and allow them to know, well, for example, I'm going to uh, be closing this bank account and moving your money into this other account for X and such reason, whatever it is that needs to be done. Um, they shouldn't be closed off from the process
So
because they've given that power to somebody else.
they mean it. They mean in the elder, and we you referred
Yes.
to a principal will be the elder or the person that they assign as power of attorney.
So the principal is the elder, right? Is the
Okay,
person on whose behalf the agent is acting. And then under a power of attorney, you refer to the person who is being authorized as the agent or the attorney in fact, as
okay.
opposed to attorney is at law. So so that's one document that has caused considerable confusion and concern, and which people have very real hesitation about doing. But yet it's so important if they need a Medicaid application to be done, if they need to access their funds, if they need to deal with anything having to do with taxes or they if they can't do it themselves and there's no power of attorney, and then at some later on point they become uh, more disabled where they can't function for themselves. The only option is for someone to apply to the court to have a guardian appointed. And
Oh,
a
okay.
guardianship is not a it's by court order. Since it's by court order, it's not something that the individual really has control over anymore. So you can appoint someone to be your attorney in fact under a power of attorney. You can revoke it or change it later on. But if someone is appointed your guardian by a court, the only way to undo that or change it is to have a further order of the court, which is of course, very expensive and time consuming and has a lot of other issues associated with it. So it's much better for someone to give that authority initially to someone to whom they trust.
And when for this, just so I understand the process. So for the power of attorney, say someone assigned my parents assigned me as power of attorney. Does that mean I can take their money?
Well, theoretically, yes, but you're only permitted to act on behalf of your parents. So if you're taking their money because you want to go on a cruise, then that is a breach of fiduciary duty, and that is something that you're not permitted to do.
Got it. Got it. So you can outline what they can use the money for. Or is that
Yes.
automatically outlined in the power of attorney document?
Well, the power of attorney has a lot of language as to specifying what can be done, but
Okay.
the law also provides that a fiduciary is under a legal obligation to act only on behalf of the principal.
Yes, and thank you for bringing up the fiduciary aspect of it as well. Clearly, as with a lot of legal issues, that there's an overlap between healthcare and medical issues as well, and as well as finance, right? And that's sort
Hmm.
of the focus of my sort of the three main areas that I'm trying to sort of tackle or try to understand. So how does that happen? Okay, so I'll give you a perfect example. So say grandma, for instance, is doing well, but we realize that there may be some things that signs of of aging or dementia, if you will, and when does a legal when does legal really set in to say like, okay, grandma, I know you want to be independent, I know you want to drive, but you can't drive any longer. I mean, how does all that work where the kids then step in and say, you're not allowed to do this anymore? Like I find it to be an extremely sensitive thing, especially when we've lived or we've been trained all our lives to be very independent, right? how
Oh
does
my gosh, yeah,
yeah.
you have brought up probably the linchpin of the whole process. It is so difficult to approach your parents and tell your parents, well, you know, you're not capable of doing this, that, or the other thing, and I should do it for you. It is probably one of the hardest things in the world because you've always had a relationship of parent to child, and no matter how old you are, it's still your parent. It
Yes.
is very hard, and some people find ways of diplomatically doing it. Some older people also find out through other means. So there are, for example, seniors groups that they're involved in, and they hear about these things from their friends or other people, and they acquire an interest, and they ask on their own about it. I have
Okay.
spoken to many seniors groups, and I think that's a wonderful way of getting out the information. It's very hard for a child to just approach their parent out of the blue and say, you know, I can see that you can no longer do these things. It's just as as I use the word tender, it's a really tough spot for you know, for everybody to be in and to navigate it in a way that doesn't cause emotional pain. I think.
Y-
Um, so we try to, if we can, get information out there to play, you know, in places where the seniors will find it on their own, if possible. Otherwise, what happens is what you said before, is that these things come up when there's an incident, when there's a fall or something where at that point then the elder person, you know, is made more aware of their frailties and that they have to turn over uh, some of their independent power over to someone else to help.
And then the other thing I hear is, and this sounds pretty consistent. I don't want that what do you call the button, that the alert button. I fall and I can't get up.
Oh,
Alert
the
button.
DNR
Yeah,
is is
the button where they, if you fall, you press a button and they come. And
that one.
yeah,
Yes, yeah.
yeah,
I'm thinking of a particular client of mine. This was a woman who didn't have family nearby, who actually appointed me as her with power of attorney. And so I took care of her for a while, and she fell, and you know, she fell and spent the whole night on the floor, and then that's how I initially got involved with her. Um, and yet that wasn't enough for her. She didn't want to have that device, and then she fell again, and then finally
wow.
she agreed to have that device, and then it's an interesting thing, but that device seems to symbolize something that many elders don't want to be associated with.
Yes, yes, and how do you sort of desensitize them to that device where it's life saving, and it's also it's kind of a it brings a sense of comfort for the kids as well, right? Because you
Absolutely,
have
yeah,
that, and then that they won't be staying overnight fallen, or for even longer if they live alone, or if their kids are far away from them. And the other thing I hear is, a lot of, contention is the having an aide, a home health aide or someone to help, a companion. There's a
hmm
lot of, resistance to that.
sure. It's an invasion, right?
Yeah,
It's an
yes,
invasion into the sanctity of your home. There's strangers there, and you know, it's a big shock. Um, Here's where we're getting a little bit out of the area of the legal part, which is what I do.
sure.
And I want to mention a group of people that many people don't know about, and they are geriatric care consultants. And
Oh,
there are
okay.
individual agencies of people. They're comprised of social workers and nurses, and their specialty is to help families do exactly what you're talking about, which is put together a plan of care for an elderly person, especially when their children are not around that they can take care of them, to allow them to stay in their own home beyond the time that they would otherwise be able to. And
Okay.
I, uh, I've been recommending this to clients more and more because of these issues, such as what you bring up, that that lawyers really can't solve.
Sure, sure.
But
Uh-huh.
it's sometimes easier for an elderly person to listen to somebody who's outside of the family.
Got it. Got it.
This
Yes.
is somebody who's not in that, doesn't have that 60-year relationship of parent to child, and with all the emotional issues that come with that.
Uh-huh.
So there is a National Association of Geriatric Care Managers,
Okay.
and
Yes.
they have a website, and people can Google that and find geriatric care managers in your area. And I'll give you an example. One of the things that they might do is they do an intake, and then you might invite them into the parents' house and say, these are my parents, and we really would like to learn how we can best help take care of them so they can stay in their home, and and so that the managers will do an assessment and help to put together a care plan.
Okay.
Who is going to be the one giving the medications? What are all the issues and how they can be taken care of? They can also um, look in the home and find ways of helping to make the home safer. So they have ideas about that, and the uh, extent to which they help depends on the situation. So
Uh-huh.
a family might only need like an assessment and a consult. Another family might need them to help find home health aides. Which are the good home health agencies in the areas, because they know all of the facilities, and they might be able to help them that way by finding uh, other caretakers that can come into the picture.
Okay, this is wonderful. I'll be
It's
sure
a
to.
wonderful resource.
Uh-huh.
I'm using them more and more
Okay.
because people need more than what I can do.
Yes, yes. I'll be sure to include that on my website as well. But like you said, going back on sort of the legal issues. So,
Hmm.
does the legal issues does it vary based on our socioeconomic status? If that makes sense.
Well,
Like,
sure. If someone who is very, very wealthy, the issues might be more geared towards their their money, their assets, and where they want those assets to go.
okay,
How they want to keep their financial legacy through the next generations. Somebody who is not very wealthy, who doesn't have a large savings or retirement, may be more. Their planning is going to be more geared to how can we help pay for them to get the proper care that they need, and that usually involves the government assistance, in particular Medicaid, whether it's long term in a facility or whether it's at home, community based care, and how to navigate all the forms and the documents that have to be provided in order to establish the need and the entitlement to those programs.
okay, yeah. This is really good to know. And in your line of work, do you also focus on Medicaid patients as well and Medicare, or it sort of runs the gamut
So
across the board?
there are attorneys that specialize in Medicaid appeals and
Okay,
really the uh, very technical uh, cases. I have done Medicaid applications for clients. I have sometimes some some clients, when I say client, I'm referring to the elderly person, but it's the family that's doing the legwork. Nowadays, Medicaid applications can be done online and documents can be uploaded. And so if family knows how to do that and they know what they need to provide, they can do a lot of that on their own. So
uh-huh.
sometimes I will just provide a consult. Well, this is what you're going to need to do, and this is what you have to have ready. And then they go ahead and do that. Um, so that's the extent to which I would handle Medicaid cases.
Okay, okay. So this is really great to know. So now, I guess my other question is, so at minimum, what should families sort of prepare for legally?
So when we meet with a person who is in need of the documentation, usually the three things we need to do are a will, a power of attorney, and then an appointment of a healthcare agent,
Okay,
which is different from a living will, because a living will might provide a lot of different things. Well, if this thing happens, then I want you to do that, or if that thing happens, I want you to do this. And there's a DNR sometimes included in there. Um, what we do is we do again a document. It's like a financial power of attorney, but it's for medical issues. And you appoint somebody to be the person to speak for you only in a situation in which you can't speak for yourself, and make medical decisions and have access to the medical file and to be able to speak with the medical care providers
Okay.
in making those decisions. So those three documents are the ones that we generally do together, and that kind of prepares someone for for their remaining years and then their estate.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's great. So, what would you say? Do you get involved in issues around, with the, the trust and Medicaid spin down, or spend down? I
Hmm.
know that's another term that people are really not too familiar with and don't even know to do that.
Yes, and there are a lot of I think there's information out there that could be misleading to people. So Medicaid, the Medicaid program, medically needy, is a program for people who don't have their own finances, and so a lot of people who are not really wealthy, but they're not poverty stricken. They're kind of in the middle, and
Okay.
they wonder, well, can we preserve our assets so that we can pass something down to our children or family
Uh huh.
and still at some point qualify for Medicaid programs if we need it later on in life?
Okay.
And so obviously, it wouldn't be a good thing for the government if people could just transfer all their assets to somebody else today and then apply for Medicaid tomorrow.
Right.
So what they have is a 5 year, what they refer to as a 5 year look back, which
Mm-hmm.
means if a person has given anything, uh, large sums, now it could be anything over $500. It doesn't necessarily have to be huge, but if any gifts were made or things were given that were not compensated for over a period of 5 years, then an inquiry is made to see what that is. So if transfers were made, if you transfer your house to your child or something something major, you've closed out your bank accounts and given them over to your cousin, that will disqualify you from Medicaid services for a period of time
Okay.
based on the amount. So when you apply for Medicaid, they'll say, "Well, 2.5 years ago, you you gave away $100,000, and so that's going to disqualify you from Medicaid for X and such months." And it's based on a formula based on the average cost of Medicaid care in an area. So
Okay.
it varies from one area to the next. So that's why people have to be careful about those things, and they need to be able to provide documentation. So if you apply for Medicaid, you have to have 5 years of all your bank account statements. If you've made any transfers of real estate or anything like that, all that comes out. Your tax returns have to be provided, and those things are cross-checked to be sure that someone is not, you know,
Double dipping, or
yeah,
yeah,
somebody
they're
who's not
manipulating.
qualified is trying to get those benefits. So it's a little bit onerous,
Yeah.
but it's a process that has to be done.
Yeah, I noticed that seems to be sort of a major flaw for families, or something that they overlook, and then they are just caught in the, Medicaid spend down. Um, the other thing too is, as you're talking, I'm hearing about, what has been your experience with families? I mean, from your experience, do they know? Do they are they knowledgeable, and sort of, people that come to you, or are they still sort of, what has been overall sort of your experience working with families?
Oh boy,
Yeah.
it's a wide range
Okay.
of experience, and um, I kind of categorize it that the best experiences are where families have good communication amongst their members, and where the children recognize that everything has to be done on behalf of the parent, in the parent's best interest. And sometimes they disagree as to what those things would be,
Right.
and so finding a consensus with that is not always the easiest thing to do. And as an attorney, one of the things that I have to be aware of is that when I come into a situation and I'm working on behalf of an elderly person, that's my client. Their family members are not my client, and it's an interesting thing in the law because in this area of law, you're often dealing with the children more than the elderly parents. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
there are language barriers, or even cognitive barriers where the elderly person doesn't understand everything.
Right.
Uh, so to some extent, I'm relying on the children to communicate these things, but at the same time, having to be aware that it's the parent who is my client and what's in their interest, even if the children have other ideas.
Right.
So communicating all of those things is what's really important. Um, Sometimes it's unfortunate that different children and different families, they may not agree with each other, and so there may be dissension. And as I referenced before, there are often unresolved emotional issues among siblings that get
Uh-huh.
into the picture too.
Yes.
Um, but overall, if they're see how I could describe it. I think that probably the best situation, and I did one very recently, was luckily for us with the onset of great technology, we were able to do Zoom meetings. And so
Uh-huh.
even if the children don't live near the parent, we've been, in some cases, been able to just have a Zoom meeting with the entire family. So everybody's on board and everybody knows what's going on. And the parent, wants the children to be, part of the process. And in a situation like that, where everybody's questions get answered and any issues that they come up are resolved, and then we go from that point on and make the plan. Those are the best because then you know that you have a good chance of success.
Uh-huh.
If you have one child who's doing all the caretaking, but the other ones are not involved at all, or they don't want to be involved, or sometimes the one who's the caretaker is kind of putting a little wall up and preventing the others from being engaged in the process.
Uh-huh.
Then where you have dissension like that, it kind of works against a positive outcome.
Yeah, yeah. You hear again lots of stories, but I think that there's again based on the family dynamic, and there's a lot of history there as well, with families and parents and that relationship. And one thing too that I think needs to be pointed out is that the the structure of that family dynamic changes once parent becomes less independent, you
Oh
know,
yes,
and
yes, hmm
this is a very extreme circumstance. But at one point, I used to work with refugees, and what we found was the when they migrated to the United States, their rate of suicide was significantly higher in the United States compared to in the refugee camp and their country of origin. And we looked at it. We did what's called a psychological autopsy. And what we discovered was that, and usually the head of household were the ones who were killing themselves. And the
oh,
reason is because that structure dynamic changed, where when they resettled in the United States, they were no longer employable, and they
hmm
didn't see any value to themselves and to their contribution to their families as they did in the refugee camp. And that's an extreme, example, but I would definitely see where, and where, what we've been talking about is this change in structure where the children, adult children, then become the parent, if you will,
yes,
to take
yes,
care of their own parents.
hmm
And that is something, a huge responsibility that even the children has to sort of accept and come to terms with. What does this
yes,
mean?
absolutely.
you
and
know, uh-huh.
and hopefully they're cognizant enough that I really believe in trying to preserve dignity as much as possible. If you have an older person who has gone through so many decades, who has held up their family all that time and done so much in their lifetime, and as they're losing their abilities, their sight, their ability to hear, their hand-eye coordination, all those little things are falling away. What falls away with that is their dignity. And
Yes.
I just think it's so important for us, whether we're geriatric caretakers or attorneys or family members, to try to help the individual maintain the sense of dignity to the end. I just think that we owe that to them in any way that we can.
And I think you just hit it on the head. I mean, I think that that is something that we need to carry, that torch, that light,
Hmm.
that legacy, of dignity, especially for families and or parents who have, like you said, taken care of families for so many years and try to sort of, was the glue, right? To piece the family together and keep them in, prospering and healthy and safe. Um, and being able to look beyond our differences and being able to then maintain and bring that dignity out, let them continue to live their life in that with dignity. I think it's the critical, and that really speaks to, it sort of reminds me of how we took care of grandma, and what we wanted her to have, that sense of dignity, and she was very particular in her ways and what she wanted, um and rightfully so. If we could, if we were able to afford the for her to maintain those particulars, we were able to do that, and we were very fortunate with the help of home health aid, um, to be able to do that. Uh,
Hmm.
I guess this has been absolutely wonderful. Any last takeaway points or things you want to share, Laura? I mean, this is
There,
you've
there is something that we didn't touch on,
sure,
which I'd like to do if we can do it briefly,
sure.
is especially in guardianship cases in which I've been involved. They have involved people who don't have family, who
Uh,
don't have anybody, and
okay,
some of them have been subject to uh, abuse or, excuse me, exploitation, one way or another, and they were reported to the uh, to the elderly, to the services for the elderly, who would bring a petition to the Superior Court to have a guardian appointed. And
okay,
those cases are particularly sad because this individual doesn't have anybody. And I've been appointed to be a temporary guardian pending the litigation until a permanent guardian is found, and spent a lot of time looking for family or friends or somebody that would serve as guardian for somebody in their later years. And these cases are just, they're heartbreaking
really,
because as you even as in the role of a temporary guardian for a month or two during the court proceedings, part of the job is finding out as much as you can about the individual. And as I go through their papers and find out about their life, I always find somebody who really had something valuable, during their life, who may have done something important, or even if that person did just the ordinary things, uh, they have value. And to see it just all disappear to the point where nobody really knows who this individual is anymore is very sad. So I just wish that our society, in whatever way we can find ways to find those people and to give them something of value, a friendship or an association or somebody that would be with them during that part of their lives, and hopefully reduce the amount of times that we find people who are just don't have anything anymore.
wow. Yeah, I think that that's really, really important. And what when I hear of guardianship, I also think of the LGBTQ community. because they're
Mhm.
and I think you and I spoke about this briefly about again, they may not have that sort of traditional family structure, for many reasons, right?
Yes. Mhm.
Neglect, rejection, and just sort of been separated from their, families for years. And, that's one of the things that I think that's one of the issues that sort of, that needs to be explored for that community and others as well, Um, you know,
Absolutely, and the law is notoriously slow in catching up with society. I mean, the way people live as families is, uh, not the way families are defined in the law, right?
yes.
we, we need to get with it a little bit more on the legal front. It's happening little by little,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
to give support to families in the way that families are constructed in reality is very important.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great point. Um, well, that concludes our interview. I cannot thank you enough. You've shared so much valuable information, and I hope that this is of benefit, and we get to, I get to target and reach as many people as I can to share your knowledge and your wisdom. So thank you very much, Laura.
You're most welcome. I hope that this has been helpful and is giving some people some ideas with which they can help their elders live the rest of their lives in a better way. Thank
Yes,
you so much for having me.
yes, absolutely.